Okay, let us begin. We are on Daf Yud Amud Aleph. I'm sorry, Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. We are on page 11a, but the Gemara really started on 10b at the end over there. We're talking about the laws of Me'ilah. And we went through the first part of it already once or twice. Basically what the Gemara is trying to figure out is, why does the Mishnah include in the category of things that are hanging, mountains that are hanging on a hair, it includes Me'ilah? I think more surprised. What exactly, what part of Me'ilah is that surprising? Taking consecrated stuff and using it for personal use. I mean, what is such a surprising law that we're going to say that it's like a hair hanging on like a mountain hanging on a hair? So the Gemara tried to come up with a interpretation. The Gemara didn't like it. Another interpretation. Anyway, the Gemara says at the end that Rav Ashi said that it's talking about a person took one of these beams, a stone or a beam, and by taking it, he did not transgress the prohibition of Me'ilah. But if he gives it to his friend, then he transgresses the prohibition of Me'ilah. That was Rav Ashi's understanding, that this might be why, or this is why, the Mishnah says it's like a harin, it's like mountains, Tuluyin Besaira, hanging on a hair, and this is a very surprising law. He says he took it. That doesn't do Me'ilah. But by handing it to your friend, that does Me'ilah. Why should him taking it not be Me'ilah? He took it for his own purpose. So the Gemara in the end says it's not such a big proof. It's not such a good interpretation. Umay Kushya, where we're going to start the two lines up from the bottom of 10b. So we're in 10b, the bottom, two lines up from the bottom. Umay Kushya, what's the question, that why should there be a difference between if he takes it for his personal use or he hands it to his friend for his friend to use, he gives it to him as a gift for his personal use? Why does only the second case, handing it to your friend, that constitutes Me'ilah? But by you taking it for your own personal use, that doesn't make a situation of transgressing Me'ilah? So the Gemara answers that it could be, the explanation is that the case is talking about a specific case. It's not the regular case. The regular case is someone takes consecrated stuff for themselves. They are transgressing Me'ilah. This Mishnah is a specific type of case where it's the treasurer who's taking it. Now, when a treasurer that works in the Beis HaMikdash, when he takes something for his own personal use, it doesn't make it Me'ilah. If someone else takes it for personal use, it makes it Me'ilah. But since he works for the temple, so whatever he moves around, and even if he has in mind, it doesn't change the possession, because whatever he's taking, in essence, isn't an act that shows that it's his. It really stays where, in order to show that it's his, the way he does an act is if he hands it to someone else. That would make it his, or possibly we'll see another example later where he builds it into his house. But by just moving it around, you're not doing an act of acquisition, of taking consecrated stuff and showing that you're using it for yourself. You're not doing in other words, not an act of acquisition. You're having in mind to use it for yourself, but you didn't use it yet for yourself, and you're moving it around. You're basically working for the temple. So the Gemara says, "My kushya dilma kiddush Shmuel." We're on the bottom line, maybe like Shmuel says. Damer Shmuel. Shmuel says, "Hacha here begizbar hamasura islay." We just turned the page. We're on page 11a. Begizbar, treasurer hamasuras layavne binyan. That the stones of building have been put into his possession, meaning he's in charge of that, and Askinon, that's what we're talking about. The chol hecha the mancha b'shusa didei mancha, wherever it's placed, wherever it is, it's in his it's in his possession. In other words, he can move it here from here till there to a third place. It doesn't matter. He never really changed its ownership, and therefore it doesn't constitute meila. However, if he hands it to us as a gift to a friend, then he has transgressed meila. And so the law of meila is not that surprising. And this would not be a good reason to call it a hadarin, tluyin, besaira, mountains that are hanging on a hair. This seems to be quite logical. So the Gemara says, Elami Seifa. Rather, let's explain it from the end of that Mishnah. That was a Mishnah. It said L'chidetnan. It was a Mishnah that spoke about Me'ilah. And the end of that Mishnah says, it's called the Seifa, the end part. It says in that Mishnah, the end of that Mishnah, that Bina'ah, if he built this stone or this beam, B'soich Beisoy, into his house, if he built it in his house, Harezel Loimal, he's not transgressing Me'ilah using consecrated property for his personal use. He hasn't transgressed Me'ilah. Ad sheyoder tachta, unless he lives under it, if he dwells and benefits under it, b'shava pruta, the value of a small coin. He has to benefit a certain value in order to transgress Me'ilah. So what we've learned is there's two ways of transgressing Me'ilah. One is changing the ownership of a consecrated item and bringing it into someone else's ownership, taking, in other words, a change of ownership. You're taking it for yourself, like almost like stealing it or taking it. So that would be a transgression of Me'ilah. The other is if you benefit from it, you're benefiting from consecrated items. So that would be a transgression. And what was that case? That would be like this case where you built it into your house and now it's raining and your hat would get ruined, except for the fact that you built this board, this beam, into your roof. So now your hat is not getting ruined. So you benefited a shava pruta, or just your hairdo is getting ruined, or your whatever. A pruta is a very minimal value coin. So any small benefit is already a benefit. So the fact that your shirt didn't get dirty from the wetness in the roof, that's already you've benefited a shava pruta, value of a pruta. So the Gemara is explaining that when we say that there is law in Me'ilah, the laws of deconsecrating holy things and using it for personal use, regarding these laws, there's something that's very surprising, and we're calling it a mountains hanging on a hair, where it doesn't explain it. So this seems to be the case. And why is this so surprising? So the Gemara explains itself. Michti, let's see. Shanuye Shanye. He did change the item from the way it was when it was consecrated. He made a change in it. It's called a shinui. He made a change in this item. And that itself should constitute me'ilah, because you basically took possession. You changed it. You did something that either not necessarily ruins it, but makes it different. You've made a difference in this item. You've made a change in the item, and that causes that should be enough to cause me'ilah. And what's surprising about this law is that we're telling you, we're saying, no, you don't do me'ilah unless you actually benefit. What is the meaning of this law? Mali dar, mali loydar. What's the difference if I lived under it? And what's the difference if I didn't live under it? Either way, I have transgressed me'ilah. It should be logically think, that seemingly. And this Mishnah, the end of the Mishnah, it mentions this law that seems very surprising. So the Gemara says, "And Hainu Kahara Natluyim B'Saira." So this is what it means that there's a law regarding Me'ilah that's like mountains hanging on a hair, because we have this question and it doesn't clearly state this law, this difference. Actually, I shouldn't just say because we have a question. It's more that we don't have this differentiation clarified in the verses. So we're calling it Hararin Tluyan B'Saira. So it's something surprising about these laws that it doesn't say clearly. So we're calling it Hararin Tluyan B'Saira. It's like mountains hanging on a hair, because where do you see such a differentiation in the verses? And so that's what the Gemara says. Maybe that's the meaning of Hararin Tluyan B'Saira that our Mishnah stated. So the Gemara says, Umay Kushya. The Gemara again knocks it off and says, what's the kasha? What's so surprising? Dilma l'chad Rav. Maybe this is like what Rav says. And what did Rav say? So the Amar Rav, that Rav says, Kegoin Sheinicha al pi aruba, that he placed it on top of a hole or a window in his roof. And the board is not actually attached to the roof. It's just placed there. And you didn't smoothen the edges to fix it up, to fit it. You didn't screw it in or bolt it in or cement it in. No, you just put it there. So it's on top of this hole, covering the hole. And idarbe, so if you live under it, that is considered that you did me'ilah. Like darbe, if you didn't live under it, so you didn't benefit, loy, you did not transgress me'ilah, because you didn't actually do anything to it. You didn't change it. It is the same. It is basically the same entity as it was before, and it's still in your possession, which is basically the possession of the treasurer, which you're in charge, and so you're whatever you do with it is basically like the Beis Hamikdash's item. You're just moving it around, and if you benefit from it, then we will say, you have now transgressed Milah. But if you didn't benefit from it, then you didn't transgress Milah. Now, according to this, we don't really have a way of explaining Hararin Tluyan B'Saira, that Me'ilah, there's a law about Me'ilah that it doesn't say in the Torah clearly, and we didn't find the case, because pretty much the laws of Me'ilah seem to be pretty much clear to us. All the cases that we mentioned, there's reasons for it, and it sort of fits with the meaning of the verses. You benefited from it, you didn't benefit from it. You changed it, you didn't. Everything seems to be pretty much clear. You gave it to your friend, so you changed the ownership of it. You didn't change ownership of it. If it seems like we have some clarity in the laws of Milah. Why does the Mishnah say it's like mountains hanging on a hair? So the Gemara says, Ella rather, liyoilam really kidder Rava, like we answered earlier. Rava's interpretation. Rava's interpretation was the second interpretation. We had Rami Bar Chama first, and then we had Rava. And Rava was dealing with the case of the Shliach, Shluchei Shaladim Maisai, and this was where we did have a little issue understanding it. It was surprising. The Rava was surprised that when the Baal Habayis found out that it was consecrated monies that he had given to his emissary, that was the case. A Baal Habayis, a homeowner, made a shliach, made an emissary, and he handed him money that he thought was unconsecrated money, and it turned out, he found out afterwards that it was consecrated. In the meantime, the emissary is already left, and the law was that when the emissary goes and buys whatever he was told to buy with it, some mundane thing, not holy things, and for personal use, it ends up that the shliach is the one who ends up being subject to the penalties of me'ilah. And Rava felt very sad for that person. He called him the poor shliach. That was his term. It doesn't mean he's poor financially. It means the poor guy. What did he do wrong? Nebuch. It's like the Yiddish word nebuch. Well, you can't. It's sad. It's not his fault. It's a sad situation. Shliach Anya, Michael Ovid. What did the poor shliach do? The poor guy. He didn't know any better. He was just using it. Someone asked him to go to the store with this money. He went and he bought his, clothing. And he didn't know any better. And then the other guy gets out of it because he realizes, this consecrated monies, I don't want to make a shlichus of sending. I'm not sending anyone to the store, but I'm canceling. He immediately stops his shlichus is canceled, but the other guy doesn't know about it. So he goes and buys it. So he ends up being the one responsible. The question is, why should that guy be responsible? Of course, shliach, and we don't see such a law regarding, in clearly written in the differentiation of this such a law in the laws of me'ilah, that shliach should be the one responsible. Now, even though he does nothing. So the Gemara didn't like that initially. The Gemara said it's not such a good proof because guess what? The main laws of me'ilah, what's the main innovation of me'ilah? Is that when you do it by mistake, you got to bring a sacrifice. The whole law of me'ilah is mainly the main innovation of me'ilah is the law of the shoygeg, of the one who does it by mistake. If you do it on purpose, you actually don't bring the sacrifice. The yasham me'ilah, which is the guilt offering, and the same law would apply to the fifth. You add that fifth a penalty onto it. That doesn't apply to a person who does it on purpose, who's using consecrated stuff on purpose. Like that's not really the main insight of me'ilah. Me'ilah is really all about shoygeg. So the Gemara asks on Rava, the whole me'ilah is all about not doing something on purpose. You could say the whole me'ilah, the poor guy, what did he do? He forgot that it was consecrated. That you're going to make him pay such a penalty, bring a sacrifice and pay a penalty. The poor guy. You could say the same law, and that's the whole law of me'ilah. So it is pretty much clear that that is what me'ilah is. It's by mistake. So that was the question we had on it. So now the Gemara is going back and revisiting that answer that Rava gave. Ela li'olam k'de Rava, the Gemara says. Rather, really, it is like Rava had said initially. Udeka kashalach. This that you asked, that it was questioned to you. This that you had a question on this. That midi dahava, that this is the same thing. When anyone takes sanctified money and uses it for mundane purposes, personal use, that's what me'ilah is, even though the poor guy didn't know that it was consecrated. So the same thing as this shliach. The balabayas was mevatel the shlichus. The balabayas, the sender, nullified the shlichus. This guy ends up using it. It's a shaygeg. That was the question. That was the rebuttal. But the Gemara says it's not such a good question. Really, Rava's answer is a good answer, because Hassam over there, by anyone who uses consecrated money by mistake, Meida Yoda, the Iko Zuzi de Hegdish. He knows that in his house there is Hegdish money. He forgot that this is the Hegdish money. Made a mistake. He used the wrong, but he knew that in his house there is Hegdish money. Now, if so, he should have checked first. He should have looked. Where's the Hegdish money? Where's this money? Where'd this money come from? Where did I put the Hegdish money? He should have checked first and made sure that this is not Hegdish money. Hegdish means consecrated. He didn't. And therefore, he made a mistake. That is a mistake that you didn't do it on purpose, true, but you're not totally innocent. You should have checked. Hacha, here that the balabayas, the sender, in the case where the sender remembers now after he already sent the shliach, after he sent the emissary, he now remembers. Me Yoda, does the shliach know? Did he know that there was Hegdish money in the house? Did he know that this might be the Hegdish money and the sender didn't check? Does he know that? He doesn't know. He doesn't know that in the house there's Hegdish money. And therefore, he is much more of a, as I said earlier, he's karav la'inus. He's much more closer to being a sort of like similar to the law of being forced, where it's not your fault. You did zero. You have zero responsibility. This is very much closer to that type of law. And therefore, that we obligate the shliach and say, you have to pay, you have to bring the carbon me'ilah, you have to pay the penalty. This is a case that the Mishnah says, Kahararin, Hatluyin, Besaira. This is the case where mountains hanging on a hair, that we don't have clarity in the verses that this should be the law. And yet that is the law. And it is surprising. And maybe if we learned Me'ilah, maybe we could understand it better. But at this point, what we understand about that law is that it's basically a technical issue where the shlichus is canceled, and it ends up that he's the one who ended up taking consecrated money and using it for personal use. But we don't have clarity at least in the written Torah. It's called mountains hanging on a hair. And we only have a similar case, but it's not the same. The other case is a case of shogeg. This is called karav la'inus. Okay, so that is the way the Gemara is explaining the law of Me'ilah. So we tried numerous options, and we ended up going back to option B, to the second one, even though there were a number, maybe 5 different ways of explaining it. It turned out everyone got proven wrong except the second one. Yes, Ben.
That's what yesterday Ezra and me were complaining about, but it turns out that the halacha is still the way it is.
As much as we would like you both to be right, and you are right, there is a question. The Gemara is bothered with it itself. The Gemara says this is a good question, so you're not wrong about the question, but the halacha is the halacha. So we need to try to understand it. It's Haran Tluyim B'Saira. It's at least in the from the wording of the Torah, it doesn't seem like that should be the halacha. But you're right. But that is the halacha. Okay. So now we go to the next case. The next case, the Gemara brings something that was not in the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said these laws, it doesn't say anything about these laws. It says a little, but it does. It's pattern Tluyim B'Saira, those laws, they have what to rely on. In other words, there is good proofs, good proofs from the Torah for it, even though it doesn't say it explicitly. But we didn't mention Negoim and Oyalois in our Mishnah. Negoim is the law of leprosy, and Oyalois is the laws of impurity through being in the same tent, or making yourself, or the impurity is the tent that is covering, or it's in the same tent, or it is the tent. And these two laws are brought in a brisa. Mishnah didn't mention them, but there's a brisa. So the Gemara now, we're starting the next little piece, which you can tell it's a new piece because it has the two dots. We're on page 11a. We must be about 12, 13 lines from the top of the page. And there's two dots over there. It says, Mikra muat v'halachais merubais. Mikra muat means it has little words in many laws. Now, the brisa, Tana, we learned in a brisa. Here is a statement from a brisa. Tana, we learned in a brisa. Negoyim, the laws of leprosy. The oyalois, in the laws of the impurity of a tent, of a tent of a dead body. In other words, either a dead body is in the tent and a person is in the same tent, or the dead body is covering over the person, or the person is covering over the dead body. These laws of tents with a dead body, mikra muat v'halachais merubais, there is small verses and many laws. Now the Gemara is bothered by this brisa. What's the problem? The problem is, if you've ever learned the Torah portion called Tazria Mitzayra, you will find that it has numerous verses that talk about all different types of leprosy, biblical leprosy. If it's on a person's skin, if it's on a person's hair, if it's on in the area of the hair, if it's on if it's on a person's clothing, if it's on a person's house, all different types of laws with regard to leprosy. And if it's on a wound, so why does this brisa say it's mikra muat? You got a whole Torah portion about it. So that's quite a lot of laws, quite a lot of verses. So you got quite a lot of verses. Why does it call it mikra muat? So the Gemara asks this question: Negoyim mikra muat? Is negoyim minimal verses, minimal scripture? Doesn't have much words about it. Negoyim mikra merubahu. Negoyim has a lot of verses. Pretty much, it's all psukim. It's all. So Amar Rav Papa says, Hachika Amar. This is what it means to say in the brisa. Negoyim is mikra meruba v'halachos muatos. It has a lot of verses, and halachos are minimal. In other words, pretty much the verses spell it all out. So the halachos are minimal because the verses pretty much discuss at length the laws of leprosy, biblical leprosy. Again, we're not talking about what the doctors call leprosy. We're talking about a certain type of leprosy that comes from different sins. One of them that the famous one that it comes because of is lashon hara. But the Gemara does mention that there were a number of other sins that it came from as well. But anyway, we're talking about biblical leprosy, and there are many verses about it. And so the Gemara says, yeah, mikra meruba b'halachos muatis. It has a small amount of halacha, meaning oral tradition that we don't see from the verses. And ayalois, however, when it comes to ayalois, when it comes to tents, mikra muat, the laws of tents, that is mikra muat, very small amount of verses, v'halachos merubais, but it has many laws. So we are sort of changing around the wording in the Brisa. And we're adding some words. We're saying that the Negoyim is a lot of verses and a small amount of, in other words, we're sort of like separating the two into two different clauses. First is Negoyim is one category, two different categories, and Ayalois is really the other category, and Ayalois fits well. It says Mikra Muad Halachis Merubais. But Negoyim, we're basically saying Negoyim is in contrast to Ayalois. And the Negoyim is the exact opposite, because Negoyim is many verses, small amount of oral tradition teachings, halachis, and that doesn't say in the Torah. And Ayalois is the opposite. Okay. So the Gemara says, why is the Brisa mentioning this teaching to us that Negoyim, making a contrast between Negoyim and Ayalois? Umay nafka mina. And what is the difference? Whether it does have a lot of verses and less oral traditions, or less verses and more oral traditions, more teachings, more laws. The Gemara says, what's the difference? And the Gemara answers, milsa, if you're unsure of something, b'negoyim, with regard to the laws of biblical leprosy, ayin bekroi, check out the verses. Look into the verses. See if you find the law that you're looking for. It's in the verses, probably. Milsa, but if you're unsure of something in regarding the laws of tents, ayin b'masnisin, check out the Mishnahs of Ayalois, because the verses, you're not going to find much in the verses, and the Mishnah, you will find much more. Now, and the Gemara continues into the laws of dinim. And the laws of dinim we did have mentioned in our Mishnah. So again, the Mishnah, our Mishnah is on page 10a. We're on page 11a. But on page 10a, we had our Mishnah. And our Mishnah mentioned Heter Nedarim. It mentioned Shabbos Chagigas and Me'ilois. And then it mentioned Hadinim, Ha'avodos, Ha'toharos, Ha'tumos, V'arayos. So it mentioned a number of items, a number of laws that we're going to say, Yesh lahen al mashe yismeichu. They have what to rely on, but what that means that they have what to rely on is that they aren't explicit, but there's enough to base it on. Yesh lahem al mashe yismeichu means it's not explicit, but there is enough to base it on. So the Gemara asks about monetary laws. Dinin, monetary laws, how could you say that they are not explicit and you have what to rely on? In fact, this week's Parsha, Mishpatim. Why would you say that? Michtav Ksivan, they are explicit. So the Gemara answers, like Nitzracha Elak L'chad Rebbe, what it's referring to is this law that Rebbe says. Yes, Ben.
Yeah,
Ben?
but I thought we always rely on what the Torah says. How does it help us to look in the Mishnah? The Mishnah is already an explanation of what's in the Torah.
It's a combination of the Torah and the interpretations of the rabbis on things that it doesn't say clearly in the Torah. And the Mishnah, when it comes to the laws of Vayalos, you really are not going to find much to be able to clarify if you just look at the psukim, of the verses. You need to get clarity from the Mishnah. But if you have a question about leprosy, the first place to go is the verses, because there you have pretty much it's spelled out the laws of leprosy in the parsha. That would be like your first case. You know what I mean? It's like someone asks you a question about the laws of Shabbos. Where would you look up the laws of Shabbos? Would you open a Chumash and say, "Oh, Vayakel"? It talks about I'm going to look up Parshas Vayakel. No, if you have a question about the laws of Shabbos, you're going to jump straight to the Shulchan Aruch. But if someone asks you something about creation and the first 6 days of creation of the world, you would open a Chumash. You would say, "Yeah, Bereshit Sparrow again. Let me see what it says. What day? What was created on Tuesday?" You know that you look up. So in other words, where would you look something up if you wanted to look up Negoyim, leprosy? And the truth is, the psukim would be a good start.
But if it's not clear in the Torah, that's what you call a mountain hanging on a hair.
But there's so many verses, right? But no one claims that Negoyim are Haran Tluim B'Sayrim. That no one said. Even the Brisa that initially said something about Negoyim, initially we thought it meant it has minimal verses. But in the end, it doesn't say that. In the end, it actually says that it has a lot of verses. But it nowhere said Haran Tluim B'Sayrim.
So you don't have to look in the Mishnah. You have enough information in the Torah.
In the Chumash, right? And that's what the Gemara says. That with Negoyim, with leprosy, you could look in the Chumash. But when it comes to the laws of Ayalos, you're not going to find much in the Torah about Ayalos.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Maybe one verse, Ish ki yeh ba'ayal, something, Adam ki yamas ba'ayal, right? Adam ki yamas ba'ayal, one verse,
Okay.
Not going to find much.
I didn't get it. If
you look at Tractate Ayalos, you're going to find a nice amount of chapters over there, and it's not so easy. So that's what the Gemara is basically saying. Okay, so now the Gemara jumps to Dinim.
All right, thank you.
No problem. The Gemara jumps now to Dinim, and Dinim are monetary laws, and the Gemara said that the Gemara jumps to Dinim because Dinim is the next case of the Mishnah, and the Mishnah had said that Dinim are Yesh Lahen al Mashe Yismeichu. Now, Yesh Lahen al Mashe Yismeichu means they have what to rely on. We have what to rely on sounds like it's not explicit, but it's good enough. We've got some solid ground. We can rely on what we have to teach these, to get some clarity in the laws. It's not explicit, and otherwise it wouldn't say Yesh Lahem Mamashi Yismuchu. You have what to rely on. If it's explicit, it's explicit. It's not. You wouldn't use the term. You have what to rely on. You have what to base it on. So the Gemara is bothered with that because it seems that dinim are pretty explicit. It talks about if you have a shar, one shar gores another shar, one ox gores another ox, or an ox gores a person, or an ebed, and and it has the monetary laws. If you damage someone, if nezek tzar ripi shavas and boishes, the laws of damage, you have to pay the medical bills, and you have to pay what you damaged, you have to pay for the loss of work, and the embarrassment and the pain. And, it has basically the monetary laws. You give someone something to watch and he loses it, or it gets stolen, and and he borrows something and he doesn't return. All these laws are basically here in Parshas Mishpat, this week's parsha. Michtav Ksivon, they're written. So why are we saying you have what to rely on? So the Gemara answers like Nitzracha Ela Rebbe. The reason why we're saying you don't have you have what to rely on, it's not explicit, is because we're following the view of Rebbe in a certain law, that in that law it's actually not so explicit, but there is what to rely on. There is what to base it on. What's the law of Rebbe? The law of Rebbe is a law of two people fighting. They're fighting physically. And unfortunately, there is a pregnant woman that somehow ends up in the middle of this fight. Either she was walking by, somehow it ended up that she was ended up being the recipient of the blow instead of the other guy who was he was angry at. So she ended up getting the blow. Now, talks about two cases. One case is where, unfortunately, the baby, the child, she's a pregnant woman, so the fetus ends up being a miscarriage. She ends up miscarrying because of this, because of this punch that she received. The baby died. The fetus died. The other case is where she dies. Now, the question is, when someone has in mind to kill someone and they kill them, we know the penalty is death penalty, right? The murder in Jewish law, we believe in the death penalty. Now, what happens if you have in mind in killing one person and by mistake you ended up killing a different person? In other words, somehow someone else got mixed in over there and the bullet hit a different person instead of the person you aimed at. So can you say that you are, can we say that the person is guilty of murder, intentional murder, because he did not intend to kill that different party? So would you call that intentional murder?
No.
Or not? And there really are two ways to look at it. Because on the one hand, you did plan on killing someone, and it just happened to be that it ended up being the wrong person, but you were intentionally murdering. On the other hand, it was a different person. What did you want to say, Ezra?
No, I would have said wouldn't it be the same case as an individual who has to go to the Arei Miklat to them, because of the fact that they killed somebody by accident?
Yeah, so the case of killing by accident is much less of a harsh act. Unfortunately, the person died, but the act was a much different type of act. He's chopping wood, and either a chip of wood flies out from what he's chopping, or maybe the hammer, the metal flies off from the axe, and either the wood or and it goes and kills someone. That's really not intentional. This case is I would say it's a much harsher case when you intentionally are murdering.
This individual had no intention of killing the woman or the baby.
No, but he had intention of killing. He gave that blow, which
he had
to kill.
Intention.
The blow was to kill, and it happened to be it was the lady who received it instead of the other guy. But the blow was an act of murder. It was a murderous blow. The chopping wood. I'm not disagreeing with you, Ezra. That
but when I'm looking at what we're talking about here and comparing it to Mal.
Now you're comparing it to Me'ilah?
To Me'ilah.
Okay, because the Gemara is not really comparing the two to Me'ilah.
but this
okay.
There was no intention on the part of the shaliach to do whatever, and yet he ends up getting whatever. And here it happens that this individual may have wanted to strike A, he ends up striking B had no intention of striking B. And so from the parallelism between the two, then the person who did the striking really should be forced to live somewhere else because of the fact that he did an act which was unintentional.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is, he had in mind to kill somebody, but he killed the wrong person. And what we've learned from Meila is that it doesn't matter what your intention is. Meila by definition is A, and here what I'm saying very simply is he had no intention of killing this woman, and so therefore he did it b'shogeg. He may have had a different intention altogether, but he did it b'shogeg, and so therefore he has a perfect right to be put. He has a perfect right to run to the Ayah Miklat because of the fact that he didn't do it on purpose. He had no intention of killing the woman.
Right. So, the Chumash doesn't say about going to Ayah Miklat, but in Chumash it says v'nasato nefesh tachas nefesh. So. I see you're trying to connect it and try to find some similarity with this law and the law of Meila, which is interesting. The problem with the connecting it to Meila is there is the logical thing to say about Meila, and then there's the actual halacha of Meila. The actual halacha of Meila, we were surprised that that's the halacha, but that is the halacha. But then you have the logic behind it would have been different. And the case of Meila was like really an einus. I mean, you totally can't, you really can hardly blame the guy. You called him Anya, this shliach Anya, the poor shliach, right? What was the term? The poor guy, like what he shliach Anya, Michael Ovid, yeah, the poor guy. So I don't know, you know what I mean? In the Gemara, it's not like the Gemara is comparing the two. And the laws of Meila are really different than the laws of murder. So I'm not 100%
let me ask you a
seeing
question.
it the way you're seeing it. But okay, yeah.
The Mishnah itself, the way it's written, is written as one entity or several entities that were combined in the editing process. Because if it's one entity, they're basically saying there is similarities between the items that we're including in this particular Mishnah.
Yeah, the only thing is the similarities that the Mishnah is saying is that some have more clarity in their laws and some have less clarity in the written law. That's really what the Mishnah is getting at. This is not explicit, but it's has what to rely on. Here it has laws that are not even that don't even have what to rely on. They're like mountains hanging on a here. That's what it's comparing. Well, it's not really comparing the rulings. You know what I mean? It's not saying, well, here you go by two witnesses, and it's not really comparing the laws. It's more comparing the fact that some have laws that are more explicit, and some have laws that are less, more what to rely on. I think that's the comparison. You're trying to compare the two, and I'm not saying it's wrong to compare. You can try to bring connections and see differences. I'm just saying it's not so simple to compare this case with that. I don't see such a relationship with these two cases. I mean, well, one case is, a person is really not so guilty. The other case is much more of an act of guilt. But in any event, I mean, you could think about it and try to compare. I mean, that's what Gemara is all about, is comparing, is about Madama Milsa La Milsa, right? That's what it's all about, is trying to compare things and differentiate and understand the differences. So I'm not saying it's wrong to compare and try to see, have like a code of what the rule is, why here we do this and why here we do that. That's libun hilchasa, clarity of the halachas, is a great thing. But I'm just saying it's not outright. I don't see such a easy connection here. I sort of see what Rebbe says is one thing, and even those that argue on Rebbe is basically claiming that maybe he is penalized with a death penalty. But anyway, definitely a good thing to try to compare. I'm not. I don't want to knock your interest in trying to get clarity in laws. I think that's a good thing. It's just I just don't. I don't really see it so good, this connection with Me'ilah laws. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, the case of the man who causes the woman to miscarry with a blow actually precedes Matan Torah, because it says that in Sodom, if a man caused a woman to miscarry, she needed to live with him until she became pregnant again.
Interesting. Where do you see that? Is that a Gemara somewhere?
No, I guess it may have been Mayam Louise.
Okay, that's an interesting little tidbit. Okay, so back to the Gemara. So we have the statement of Rebbe. Rebbe says, Nefesh tachas nafesh. That it says that when the woman ends up getting hit, in one of the blows hits the woman, she somehow and she dies. So you have to give nefesh tachas nefesh, soul for a soul. Now the simple reading of that would be the death penalty, but Rebbe says no. Rebbe says mamoin. It means monetary. It doesn't mean a soul for a soul, that the person who punched her gets the death penalty. It means monetary. You got to pay her value to her, to those that that inherit her, and whatever that is, $10 million, whatever her official value would be, you give that to the inheritors, and they would receive what's the value of a soul in place of her soul. So it means mammon. Ata omer mammon. So Rebbe explains himself by saying, you say it means money, or einoi ela nefesh mamish. Maybe it actually means that the individual who gave the punch should really lose his life and should get the death penalty. Maybe it means nefesh mamish. You kill the murderer. And the Gemara says, Nemra nesina lamata. It says the word nesina below, which means at the end. V'nemra nesina lamaila, and it says nesina above in the beginning. Nesina is it's the same paragraph in the Torah where it mentions both times the word nesina. One of them is where the woman dies, and the other one is where she only miscarries. The baby, the fetus dies. So it says nesina lamata means below, meaning later. That's where the woman dies. In Nemra nesina lamaila, it says nesina above means where the fetus dies and she miscarries. Now, mala halon, just like over there by the miscarriage, mamain, he has to pay the value of the veladais, of the children. If she was pregnant with twins or triplets, he pays the person who gave that blow, the murderer, he pays the husband the value of the blood, just like over there it means mamain, it means money. Afkan, also in the end, where the woman dies, also it's mamain, it means money. So in other words, it's a gzeira shava. We have a word here and a word there, and we connect the two words. We compare the two words and say, just like over there it means money, here also it means money. Now, this statement of Rebbe is not clearly written in the Torah. In fact, from the wording of the Torah, it definitely seems like nefesh tachas nefesh sounds like a soul for a soul, sounds like the death penalty. And here, Rebbe says, no, we have a gzeira shava that it doesn't mean the death penalty means money. And the Mishnah says this is called yesh lahem al malismai. There is what to rely on, and this would be the understand. This would be a way to understand. This would be the way to understand the Mishnah that dinim, monetary laws, have yesh lahem al mashi yismaichu. They have what, even though the verses imply differently, but yesh lahem al mashi yismaichu has what to rely on. Yes, Moshe. Yeah.
If murder is derisa, I mean, if it's thou shall not kill, I mean, why you would think that it would be the death penalty, that you can't pay somebody for somebody who's lost their life.
So you're asking that why should it be money? It really should be the death penalty.
Of course.
How do you pay?
How do you pay back if somebody's lost their life? It can't be, I mean, you can't replace it. I mean, it's derisa. Thou shall not kill. You. It's one of the commandments. So I mean,
right. But I think it's intentional in that case. In the case of it's intentional, I agree. But here we're talking about a case who was not intentional.
His intention was to kill, and he killed the woman,
not the baby, and not the woman. It would be the equivalent of us saying manslaughter, I guess.
Where's Isaac when we need him? Isaac, you're the guy over here.
The judge.
Isaac, what's the American law? Isaac, where are you? So anyway, Moshe, what you're saying is not wrong, because there is another view. It's the Rabbanan that argue on Rebbe, but this is the view of Rebbe, that it is, and what Ezra is saying is the explanation that Rebbe says that there's a difference here, that it's not actual, it's not the typical case of murder where you fully are intending for the person that you murdered. So that would be intentional murder. This is not.
I see.
So, but there is such a view. So what you're saying is not wrong. Okay, so the Gemara now, and by the way, this law that the Gemara now says about nefesh tachas nefesh, it also applies that in the verses it talks about ayin tachas ayin, eye for an eye. And the same thing over there, it doesn't mean an eye for an eye, it means money, right? If a person damages someone, we don't, it's not one of these Muslim countries where they maybe do the eye for an eye or other things in Jewish law, even though the verse implies an eye for an eye, but it actually means money.